I was in several bands when I was a teenager, and I really enjoyed it. I got into music really as a teenager for social reasons. My name's Tom Gwaltney. This is Graphic Sound, studio that I designed and built to record amazing music here in Virginia Beach, and so far so good. I really got into music big time. The band that I was in took me to a Rush concert. That changed my whole life. I forgot about why I got into music, which was totally for girls. And even though I was totally still into girls and not doing, as good as I wanted to with that, I was so into music at that point. When we walked into the first studio to record for the first time, as soon as I walked in through the door, I was like, this is where I want to be. I thought I was going to be, on a stage, but I prefer this. It's more my vibe. I can be creative. It's a pretty big structure here, but the studio is in the middle. Got the garage where everybody comes in, and then my house where I live, and the studio is right in the middle. And it's very quiet here, so it's good. Welcome to the big room at Graphic Sound. This is where I do drums, acoustic guitar, vocals. It's a really neutral sounding room, and it's pretty versatile. It's interesting that you normally don't do lead vocals and drums at the same time, so it's great for doing both. And over here is where the kind of the vocal area is, and it's kind of has that intimate, dry sound, but you can kind of launch your voice into the room. By the time it comes back and into the microphone, you're on to the next line, and it's just a really great sound. And I really enjoy playing drums in here. I have some good ceiling treatments to keep the sound in control. And again, it's just very neutral. And I will put some room mics up. And been doing a choir in here. So there's some different areas. Like this side of the room is kind of live, and over there is deader. So you can kind of control things depending on which way you point the mics. So. Yeah, so the cool thing about the studio is it's all concrete filled cinder block. It has an outer shell, including the ceiling, and the only thing that's holding the ceiling up is the outer shell and two steel beams that go up through the middle. All of the inner rooms don't connect. The only thing that they share is the floor, and they're floated on top of that. So when you make a bunch of noise in this room, it doesn't transfer to this room because they're not touching. As soon as you touch, like an Indian putting his ear on the train tracks, sound, believe it or not, travels better through solids than it does through air. So as soon as you can disconnect, you're really doing a great job of keeping the rooms separated. So I wanted to have a traditional old school studio. When I say old school, I mean 80s, where if a full band had their act together, they could come in and record in separate rooms, and you could have everything, you have control over everything. So I have a small room, a medium room, a large room, and a control room, and that's the core of what the studio can do. All right, so this is the medium room. This is where I keep all the guitars and piano. It's really the perfect size room for piano, in my opinion, because you're not going to get a big hall sound in any studio anyhow. So this is a nice controlled room. Do jazz or whatever you want to do. If you're doing something classical, and you add ambience later. Because you generally don't do guitar sessions and piano sessions, they're usually one's kind of jazz oriented, one's kind of rock oriented. So this room can either do one thing or the other, usually not both at the same time. And yeah, you got a good view of the rest of the studio, and the piano player can vibe with the drummer, and they can see what's going on in the control room through the TV. So pretty handy. All right, so yeah, this is the small room. It's actually quite a bit bigger than it looks because most of the room is bass traps. So this whole corner is a bass trap. Behind the camera there, giant bass trap here. So it's pretty tight in here, and it's great for doing acoustic guitar, vocals. Right now I have all my snares in here because I didn't want them to resonate in the other room. We did a drum session today. And it's cool, you get a good view of everything else that's going on in the main part of the studio. And I don't always have to use it, but it's great to have because when you have bigger sessions, you always need an extra room. So. Pusha T's probably been the biggest name artist that's recorded here. All of the big local artists like your Anthony Rosano's and your Mark Dunn's and Jesse Chung and some of the jazz guys, John Toomey, that gang. So we've had Andrew Coleman. He's engineered for Pharrell and Pusha T, and so yeah, I think I'm getting close to the big name stuff. Most boutique preamps are nicer than the ones that you can get on the nicest mixing board. So if you kind of piecemeal a la carte your setup, you can really get a better sound. Also, mixing in front of a giant board is a pain because there's so much splashback coming off the board. So it's really nice to work in the box on the back end of things. On the front end of things, I'm very analog. I love tube preamps. I have a Manley Slam that I use for bass, guitar, a lot of things where you really want it to be thick. I've got a bunch of Heritage Audio preamps that are the Neve clones. This is the sweetest clones. Tons of API stuff, the 500 series. So I try to have the three main flavors. You got your API, your Neve, and your SSL. I don't really have SSL preamps, but I have so many cool boutique preamps. I'm definitely addicted to preamps. Like what guitar players do with pedals, I do with preamps. I also do that with pedals. So, and I have a couple of nice analog compressors and stuff too, but mostly it's boutique microphones and preamps and digital or analog to digital converters. Super important. And that's your chain coming in. Once you're in the box, I've got all the great plugins and all that stuff. Okay, so like for instance, my main vocal mic is a Bach 250, I believe. It's a clone of a Telefunken 251 microphone that we've all heard a lot of. $20,000 mic, mine's like $5,000. Sounds the same. It's a tube mic, and I run that into a TG channeler preamp. It's the same thing they use in Abbey Road. It's the Abbey Road edition, actually, and I love that preamp. It's just amazing. All the other preamps just kind of aren't as good for vocals. People a lot of times can be intimidated by the apparatus of it all, and oh God, now we're paying money, and I just let them know it looks fancy, but it's really down to the heart of it. It's really emotional, and quickly people realize that the value of being here and working with me is that's the wavelength I'm on for them, because music is all about emotion and how it makes you feel, whether you're excited or sad or angry. That's what music does so well. And so you see all the stuff and it's like, ooh, toys and stuff, and I love the toys, but at the end of the day, I want to forget about all that. I want it to be pure. So my advice to aspiring recording engineers, because it's so integrated with technology, it can be a difficult question, but here's something that's remained true since I started in the very late 80s, early 90s, which is you have what's called transducers, microphones, headphones, speakers. Those aren't changing anytime soon. I'll be long gone before they've figured out, laser beams. You're always, when you learn about how microphones work, and how speakers work, which is really the opposite of a microphone, kind of the inverse, it's important because that's not going away. New computers come out, new plugins, AI, everything is going to be blown off the rafters. But if you want to record something, you got to use a mic. And if you want to hear it, you got to use a speaker. A lot of people ignore acoustics. They'll spend all this money on a great pair of speakers. Headphones aren't good for working with in long periods of time. You have to have good monitoring. So people know that, and they buy good speakers, and then they do nothing to their room. So it's like, nobody watches TV with a bunch of mirrors surrounding the TV. It'd be confusing and bad and not a nice experience. But that's exactly what happens when you are in a room and you're listening to sound and it's bouncing off the walls and coming back at you. And mitigating that is not too expensive, but it's not something a lot of people know how to do. So come see me, I'll tell you. But no, that's important. Getting some sound absorption panels, putting them in the right place, putting them above you and behind the speakers. That's all you got to do. Make sure you got stuff that's absorptive, very thick behind the speakers and above you, and you'll have good sound. So that's what they need to do.